Last Christmas, a billionaire looked across a glittering ballroom and saw a woman no one else could see. She was invisible, a ghost in a borrowed uniform, carrying grief so heavy it had become her whole identity. 6 months after burying her mother, 3 months after losing her job, 30 days from losing her home, he was dying. A genetic heart condition with a 5-year countdown, a secret he'd been carrying alone since the woman before Mary decided a dying man wasn't worth loving. His dying grandmother had one final wish: to see him settled, to see him loved. So Andrew Martin walked across that ballroom, leaned close to a stranger, and whispered 8 words that would change everything. "Play my wife, and I'll change your life." What started as a transaction became the truest thing either of them had ever known. Mary Wilson fell in love with a dying man. Andrew Martin let someone in for the first time in years. They married in his family church with vows that replaced "till death do us part" with "for however long we have." And somehow, impossibly, that was enough. That was Christmas. Now it's Easter. For months have passed. The champagne flutes are long gone. The glittering ballroom is a memory. The borrowed uniform has been replaced by something far more real. Mary Wilson is 8 months pregnant. Andrew Martin is still fighting. And the life they built together, fragile, beautiful, uncertain, is about to be tested in ways neither of them saw coming. This is part 2. This is what happens after the fairy tale begins. After the vows. After the miracle. When love stops being a feeling and becomes a choice you make every single morning. This is still here. Before we go further, if you haven't watched part 1 yet, go find it on this channel. Trust me, you'll want the full story. And if you're already here from part 1, welcome back. Let's get into it. For months can change everything. Mary Wilson had spent years making herself smaller, quieter, less. She'd learned to take up no space, to need nothing, to want nothing. Invisibility had become her armor, her habit, her home. But that was before Andrew. The penthouse looked nothing like it used to. The cold, impersonal space that had once felt like a luxury hotel, for one, had been transformed into something that actually resembled a life. Soft blankets draped over the sleek couches. A baby swing sat half-assembled in the corner of the living room, surrounded by instruction papers Andrew kept insisting he didn't need. Photos covered walls that had once been deliberately bare. Mary and Andrew at their wedding, small and intimate, his grandmother weeping in her wheelchair in the front row. Katerina making a face at the camera during the reception. Andrew's parents, still slightly stunned, still slightly guilty, holding each other with the grip of people determined to do better. And in the center of the mantelpiece, a single photograph of a woman Mary would never stop missing. Her mother, smiling in the way she always smiled, like she knew something beautiful was coming even when everything hurt. "I found him, Mama," Mary had whispered the day she placed that photograph there. "Just like you said I would." Spring had arrived gently over Manhattan. The city thawed slowly, cautiously, the way people do after surviving something hard. Cherry blossoms appeared overnight on the trees lining the street below. Mary stood on the balcony most mornings, coffee in hand, watching the city wake up, feeling the baby move beneath her palms like a secret being kept warm. 8 months. She was 8 months pregnant, and somehow still surprised by it every single morning. Andrew always found her there. Without fail, without exception. He'd appear behind her, wrap his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder, his hands covering hers on her stomach. They'd stand there in comfortable silence, watching Manhattan, feeling their daughter kick between them, like she was already impatient to meet the world. "She's going to be stubborn," Andrew said one morning, laughing quietly as the baby delivered a particularly sharp kick against his palm. "She gets that from her father," Mary replied without missing a beat. He kissed her temple. She leaned into him. The city hummed below them. For a moment, everything was perfect, but Mary noticed things she never mentioned out loud. The way Andrew moved, more carefully now, deliberately, like a man who had learned to conserve energy the way other people conserve money. The gray that had appeared at his temples seemingly overnight. The mornings he spent longer in the bathroom than he used to, emerging with his expression carefully arranged into something that looked like fine. She counted his breaths sometimes when he slept, hated herself for it, did it anyway. The experimental treatment continued. Every Tuesday, Andrew disappeared into a medical facility on the Upper East Side and returned 3 hours later quieter than when he left. He never complained, never made her feel the weight of it, but she felt it anyway, the way you always feel the things people who love you try to hide. His family had changed too. Katerina came by twice a week now, always with food, always with opinions about the nursery, always with a fierceness that Mary had initially found terrifying and now found completely essential. She had become the sister Mary never had, the kind of woman who would dismantle anyone who looked at Mary the wrong way and consider it a light afternoon's work. Andrew's parents called every Sunday. His mother asked about the baby. His father asked about Andrew, his voice carrying the careful brightness of a man trying not to show how scared he was. Mary always told them he was doing well. Sometimes it was even true. Mary's event planning business had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. Small at first, just corporate gatherings and intimate celebrations. But word spread the way it always does when someone genuinely cares about creating joy for others. She'd hired 2 assistants. She turned down 3 clients because the work didn't feel meaningful enough. She was building something in her mother's memory. Every event a quiet tribute to a woman who had believed that celebration was sacred. She was visible, fully, completely, luminously visible. And yet, on a Tuesday evening 3 weeks before Easter, Mary found Andrew in the nursery. They'd painted it soft yellow together on a Saturday in February. Andrew insisting on doing the high corners himself despite Mary's protests, ending up with paint in his hair and on his nose and laughing so hard he had to sit down. The room still smelled faintly of that afternoon. He was sitting on the floor, back against the wall, holding a pair of tiny white shoes. The ones his grandmother had sent from Connecticut before she passed, 2 months ago, quietly, peacefully, surrounded by every person she loved. Mary had wept for days. Andrew had held her through it, and she'd held him, and they'd grieved together the way people do when they've chosen each other completely. He didn't hear Mary in the doorway. She watched him turn the tiny shoes over in his hands, his expression unguarded in a way he rarely allowed himself. He was crying, quietly, the way men cry when they think no one is watching. Mary sat beside him without a word. He didn't startle, just exhaled, long and slow, and leaned his head back against the wall. "I just need to make it to her first day of school," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's all I'm asking for. Just that." Mary took the tiny shoes from his hands, held them in her own. "Then that's what we're fighting for," she said. He nodded, swallowed hard. Outside the nursery window, Manhattan glittered against the darkening sky, indifferent and beautiful, the way cities always are. Neither of them slept well that night. 2 days before Easter, the world fell apart. It happened quietly, the way the worst things always do. Andrew left for the office on a Thursday morning, coffee in hand, tie not quite straight the way Mary always fixed before he walked out the door. She fixed it that morning too, smooth as lapels. Looked up at him. "Come home early," she said. "Always," he promised. He kissed her forehead. She stood in the doorway and watched him go. Something made her watch longer than usual, some quiet instinct she couldn't name. The call came at 2:14 in the afternoon. Andrew had collapsed in his office. His assistant had found him. An ambulance had been called. He was being taken to Mount Sinai. The voice on the phone was professional and careful and told her almost nothing except what mattered most, that she needed to come now. Mary's hands went numb. Then her whole body went numb. She called Katerina, who answered on the first ring. She didn't cry on the cab ride over. She sat very still and stared out the window at a city that had no idea anything had changed, and she breathed the way Andrew had taught her the night of that first gala, slowly, deliberately, just one breath at a time. She was still breathing like that when the pain started. It began as pressure, low, insistent, impossible to ignore. By the time the cab pulled up to the hospital, Mary understood with terrifying clarity what was happening. She was in labor, 3 weeks early. Katerina met her at the entrance, took one look at Mary's face, and understood everything instantly, the way women who love each other always do. "Andrew," Mary managed. "He's in surgery," Katerina said, her voice steady despite her eyes. "Internal bleeding. His heart. They're doing everything they can." "I'm in labor," Mary said. Katerina stared at her for exactly 2 seconds. Then she grabbed Mary's arm and started moving. The next hours were a blur of bright lights and hushed voices and pain that came in waves Mary rode like a woman who had no choice but to survive them. She was admitted to the maternity ward. Andrew was somewhere below her, different floor, different fight, same building, same impossible night. Katerina ran between them, up to Mary, down to the surgical waiting room, where Andrew's parents sat white-knuckled and hollow-eyed. Back up to Mary, down again. She did it without complaint, without breaking, without letting either of them feel alone. At some point, Mary couldn't have said when Katerina appeared at her bedside with her phone. "He recorded this before they took him in," she said quietly. "He wanted you to have it." Mary pressed play with shaking hands. Andrew's voice filled the room, rough at the edges, undeniably him. "Mary, I need you to be brave for both of us right now. I know that's not fair to ask. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But I need you to bring our baby into the world, and I promise I'll be there to meet her. I'm not done. I have a first day of school to make it to, remember? I love you. I love you both. Now go be the strongest person I've ever known. You already are." Mary pressed the phone against her chest and sobbed, one long, broken sound, and then she pulled herself back together the way she'd learned to do, the way grief had taught her, the way love had reinforced. She was not invisible. She was not disappearing. She was here. She pushed through the next contraction with Andrew's voice in her chest, like a heartbeat. At 11:47 p.m. on Good Friday, Mary Wilson delivered their daughter into the world. She was small and furious and perfect, screaming with the conviction of someone who had decided immediately that silence was not for her. Katerina was crying openly in the corner, making no effort whatsoever to stop. Mary held her daughter for the first time, this tiny, impossible, real thing, and felt the world rearrange itself around her. "Elena," Mary whispered, her voice wrecked and certain all at once. "Your name is Elena. After Yaya Elena. After the woman who had started everything, who had looked at two broken strangers and decided to believe in them anyway." Baby Elena blinked slowly, like she was considering her verdict on the world. Mary pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead. "Close her eyes. Your daddy has to meet you," she whispered. "He doesn't have a choice." Somewhere below them, Andrew Martin was still fighting. The doctors came at 6 a.m. Mary was awake. She hadn't slept. Baby Elena was sleeping against her chest, making small sounds that were the most extraordinary thing Mary had ever heard. Katerina was in the chair by the window, finally unconscious, her head tilted at an angle that would hurt later. The doctor spoke quietly. Careful words, measured cadence. The surgery had been complex. The experimental treatment had placed significant strain on Andrew's heart, pushed it harder than they'd anticipated. But the bleeding had been controlled. The heart had responded. Andrew was stable. He was going to need rest, careful monitoring, significant adjustments to his treatment plan. There was still a long road. There were still no guarantees. But he was stable. He was alive. He was asking for her. Mary exhaled a breath she felt like she'd been holding since 2:14 the previous afternoon. Katerina woke up at the sound of her crying. "Good news or bad?" she asked immediately, alert in the way of someone who had been braced for impact, even in sleep. "He's stable," Mary managed. "He's asking for us." Katerina dropped her face into her hands. Her shoulders shook. She didn't make a sound for a long moment. Then she looked up, mascara everywhere, completely undignified, utterly beautiful. "Of course he is," she said. "Stubborn idiot." They wheeled Mary to Andrew's room, just as Easter Sunday morning was beginning to lighten the sky outside the hospital windows. The city below was quiet in the way it only ever is at dawn, still and soft, and briefly forgiving. Andrew's room was dim. His parents were there, his mother on her feet immediately, his father standing slowly, both of them trying not to show how much they'd aged overnight. They stepped back when Mary came in. Made room. Andrew looked smaller in the hospital bed. That was always the cruelest thing about hospitals. They made people look smaller. But his eyes were open, and the moment they found Mary's, something in them shifted. Steadied. "Hey," he said. His voice was rough, scrape hollow. "Hey," she said back. She looked at the woman in her arms, then at him. Then she crossed the room and placed their daughter on his chest. His hands came up immediately, instinctively, shakily, to hold her, like his body knew before his mind caught up. Baby Elena stirred, blinked, found his face with the unfocused gaze of someone still deciding what the world was made of. Andrew broke. Not quietly, not gracefully, completely. The way men break when they've been holding too much for too long, and the thing they were fighting for is finally, impossibly in their arms. His shoulders shook. His jaw worked. Tears ran openly down his face, and he made no move to stop them. "Elena," Mary said softly. "Her name is Elena." Andrew's breath caught. He looked up at Mary, then back down at his daughter, then back at Mary. His eyes said everything words couldn't reach. "I told you I'd be here," he said finally, his voice barely holding together. "You did," Mary said. "You kept your promise." She sat on the edge of the bed. He shifted carefully to make room. Their daughter lay between them, small and warm, and completely unimpressed by the drama she caused. Katerina appeared in the doorway, took one look at the three of them, and pressed her fist to her mouth. Andrew's mother began to cry. His father put his arm around her and stared at his son with the expression of a man who understood, finally and completely, what he had almost missed. Outside the hospital windows, Easter Sunday was arriving slowly, golden and unhurried, the way mornings arrive when they mean something. Spring light fell across the city in long, gentle lines. The trees along the streets below were beginning to bloom. New life everywhere, in every direction. Mary Wilson spent years making herself invisible. She moved through the world like smoke, certain no one would notice if she disappeared entirely. She had accepted this as her life, the forgettable woman at the edge of other people's celebrations, carrying grief no one wanted to sit with. Then a dying man looked at her across a glittering ballroom on Christmas Eve, and everything changed. He didn't save her. That's the thing people get wrong about love stories. They think someone swoops in and rescues you. But Andrew didn't rescue Mary. He saw her, and being truly seen, after years of invisibility, gave her the courage to save herself. She chose to stay when she could have run. She chose love when it came with an expiration date. She chose to be present for every moment of a life that wasn't guaranteed, because she had learned, through grief and loss and the particular cruelty of watching people you love disappear, that the moments you almost don't get are the only ones that really count. Andrew Martin was supposed to die alone. That was the plan. Keep everyone at arm's length. Protect them from the grief of losing him. Die quietly, without burdening anyone he loved. Instead, he held his daughter on Easter morning while his wife sat beside him, and his family filled the doorway, and spring light came through the window, and he understood something he should have known all along. Being loved while you're dying is not a burden to the people who love you. It is a gift, the greatest one you can give. Last Christmas, a transaction was made in a ballroom. 8 words whispered to a stranger. A handshake in the winter dark. This Easter, a family sat together in a hospital room, imperfect and exhausted and overwhelmingly grateful, holding a baby named after the woman who had believed in all of them before they believed in themselves. Mary Wilson was not invisible anymore. She was luminous, and Andrew Martin was still here. For now, for always, for however long they had. And that, it turned out, was everything. If this story moved you, if you found yourself holding your breath in that hospital room, if you cried when Andrew held baby Elena for the first time, then you already know what real love stories are made of. Not perfection, not fairy tales, just 2 people choosing each other, over and over, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Hit that like button if Mary and Andrew's story touched your heart. Subscribe so you never miss what's coming next, because trust me, this channel has more stories where this one came from. Drop a comment and tell me, which moment hit you hardest? Was it Andrew's voice message from the operating room, baby Elena's first breath, or that Easter morning when a family finally came together? I read every single comment, every one, and if you haven't watched part 1 yet, go find it on this channel. Start from Christmas. You'll understand why Easter means so much more when you do. See you in the next story.